not the ideal segue, but I did want to talk about another new foundation model. And I think the way I would fit this in is to talk about that there does still seem to be an actual acceleration. If you just think about all the news in AI since January, right, just this year, Google has just released Gemini 2.5 Pro. Um, and this is apparently yet another new high watermark in AI. It apparently outperforms Claude 3.7 in coding, right? So I'm currently leading an engineering organization, and we're like, wow, this stuff just keeps accelerating to actually write good quality code. And so, yeah, I think we don't have to labor this one, but it's just another really exciting moment. And, actually, there is one thing I wanted to point out. We were talking about the uncanny valley before, right? This idea that you can tell that something's AI generated, that it's slop and so on. And that was maybe true 6 to 9 months ago. Now it's cope. The kind of work that AI can produce is as good or better than what most humans can produce. And, you see it's nearly a trope on LinkedIn. There are these posts saying, here are the tells that you can tell something's AI generated. But actually, there was some recent research that's sort of showing that people generally prefer AI generated content. They actually rate AI as more empathetic than humans in a blind test until they're told it's AI. And then they're like, I don't like it anymore. Right. So we've kind of crossed the uncanny valley. And in my experiments using Gemini 2.5, I'm like, wow, this thing writes really well. It thinks in a sophisticated way and in a way that a human does. At least the output sort of shows that. So, yeah, pretty crazy times.
I think I stand with you on what's been interesting to see is this proverbial arms race of capital, compute, and models. And I still contend that as we're seeing people scale, the real race, it's almost reminds me of like race up to mainframes, and they just kept adding, more and more capability. The computers got larger and larger. And I think the real model innovation that I'm excited about, I think people aren't talking about it as much anymore, is what happened with DeepSeek and whatever as the kind of the sea change that it could potentially introduce. I've already seen, and there's some people working on models that don't have backprop and that can be much smaller. And, ultimately we still have this fundamentally very power efficient machine called the brain. And so we know you can do that. We know that it's possible. And so, I'm excited by it. I think it's good. I only got to test it out cursorily, so I didn't have the same kind of depth of experience. But I think what excites me more is the fact that there are these at least three companies that are just continuing to innovate at this rapid pace and pushing each other, pushing the industry forward at the
Yeah.
same rate of change. That to me is what's staggering. And it's just, I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. I was talking to some of our mutual founder friends, Chris, that and these are like solid entrepreneurs, people who built unicorns, and so many of them are saying the same version, the same story. It's, I've never been more excited, and I've never not been able to see what's going to come up next. Like
Mhm.
I have this anxiety that's building up more and more about what's going to happen. And this, like, again, the sea change is occurring. You can see it all coming together, for the first time. So it's really interesting.
We've used this phrase a couple times on the show, but it's exponentials on top of exponentials, right? The hardware is getting better, the algorithms are getting better, the data acquisition is getting better, the refinement and training is getting better. The use cases are getting broader. This is serious stuff. So I think it's taken as read now that the models will get better, right? Water is wet. The models are getting better. That you can take that basically to the bank for the foreseeable future, Moore's law style. We don't know when it ends. The real question now is about use cases, utility, and distribution. And I think that's a good segue actually into a topic we wanted to separate out, but let's just put it all in here, which is Google has just shipped an experiment to some people. And I was one of the lucky few. And I have not personally read any news stories about this.
I've got it as well.
Yeah, AI mode for Google, Google search. So, the key to these things and the key to advantage that a Google, that a Facebook has over an OpenAI is distribution. They own the surfaces, the attention surfaces that people use every day, the workflows, the tools that people use every day. And they've sort of jammed in Gemini in Google Docs, and they've jammed in Gemini in Gmail, and they've jammed in Gemini in, Copilot alongside Office 365. But the crown jewel for Google is search. And then there they sort of, added some AI answer thing, and it's sort of been janky and it's sort of got a bit better. But now for the first time this week, I went to Google on my phone and it said, hey, would you like to try new AI mode? And the whole thing flipped into a ChatGPT style, Perplexity style LLM interface, chat interface. And Google became ChatGPT when ChatGPT with search. And I was like, I had goosebumps. I was like, holy fuck. This page, this homepage is google.com, has not changed in how long? How long, guys, has Google been Google? Like, almost exactly as it's been, with the same I'm feeling lucky button. They radically changed it. This is just like an earthquake on the internet. It's I shouldn't talk about earthquakes this week, but it's just a massive, massive change. And so this is really Google. I mean, assuming this experiment rolls out and wins and then becomes part of their core UX, this is Google saying, yeah, conversation is the future, LLM is the future, and we're not going to sprinkle it into the top of the 10 links. We're going to replace the 10 links. Hooman, you said you saw this. What do you make of it? Is it as dramatic as I'm saying?
It's interesting. I had a similar reaction in the sense that, so for the last couple weeks, I'd been, talking to friends, and we had been discussing the future of Perplexity. Okay. And I think it's a company that has done amazing work. I think that they've really kind of created a great interface for research, but I continually am reminded of, I mean, maybe I'm just at this point where I have enough cycles. I'm like, look, Google has the distribution, Facebook has the distribution. And, you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because GPT and Anthropic have been consistently upgrading their interface to include web search, and they're making it better and better and better. So you have one side, and these guys are well heeled. I mean, obviously, we just saw the announcement on, and I think we're going to talk about that with OpenAI, right? I mean, that was an insane fundraise. I mean, you just look at it and it's like, I can't believe we live in a world where a private company is raising like that. It's just, it's staggering. And then on the flip side, you have Google, who is, I mean, they made a transformer model, for Christ's sake. Like, this is their game. Like, I remember when Eric Schmidt announced type-out search, and everyone was flipping their shit because they thought, oh my God, they're going to ruin the click-through rate. They're going to ruin the marketplace. Like, that was fairly disruptive at that point, if you guys remember. Mm-hmm. And then I think what I was suggesting was, like, at some point, Google is going to put in this mode or something and say, hey, we're just going to keep testing it. And I honestly, I give them a lot of credit. I did not think that they had the courage to do that. Put it at the top. By the way, I don't know about you, but it's on my far left. And most people who are Western audiences and people who are UX designers, you understand the boldness of that move. They actually put it number one. So that is going to cannibalize the core search, which means they're going to start seeing it. I give them credit. I think it was good. And honestly, it was an interesting first experience. What I will say, which is, and for those of us who drive growth and marketing, this is going to accelerate an already continuing trend, which is SEO as we know it is gone. I mean, he's gone. I don't know if you guys are seeing this in companies that you work on, but anyone who's been dependent on this, building Q&A style content, blog posts. Luckily, my company is not so dependent on it, but I had companies in my portfolio and they've just seen the search volume drop. And I think if this succeeds, it's going to change the game. I just don't know how this impacts Google. It's so bold that they're doing this, because I'm sure they're running the math, but I mean, can you imagine? It's the largest click market in the world, and they're just saying, okay, we're going to change it.
Yeah. So actually, I want to press on that a little bit, Hooman, and I don't know what I believe yet, but I want to be devil's advocate for a second. I don't think this breaks SEO. I think it breaks traffic, but it may accelerate qualified leads. So let me explain what I mean. In order for the LLM to have an opinion or be able to point users with a question to the right place, the LLM's crawler needs to find you. So that means that SEO is still relevant, because you still need to be in the index. You still need to rank high. You still need the LLM's crawler to decide your page is worth looking at, your information is worth trusting. So SEO doesn't die. It's traffic volumes that die, because there aren't millions and millions of people who need to read your website. It's just the LLM that needs to read your website and explain it to millions of people. But maybe while the traffic plummets, qualified leads are maintained or increased for high quality businesses. Now, that's a huge maybe, huge, right? Some people, their business is based on traffic, ads and what have you, media companies and so on. But if you're offering a transactional service that is not some B2B SaaS that could get generated on the fly by the LLM, that it manipulates the real world. I'm thinking Uber, Airbnb, what have you, or a massive multiplayer game like Facebook, Instagram, video
Or
games.
like business SaaS tools. I mean, there's a lot. I don't disagree. Yeah.
In that case, then you don't need all that traffic. You just need the users, and maybe that you're in an okay spot in that regard. So, what do you guys think? It's you're going to separate SEO from traffic from sales, and there's a different answer for each of those things.
So, I mean, I had a page rank 10 for my last company, and I'm pretty deep on the SEO side. What I meant by the statement, and I'm not disagreeing with your posit, is that it's a disruptive to the model. So the current way that everything is working, okay, you're probably going to see the volume is going to change, right?
Mhm.
Because it's also going to change the nature of where traffic is going to move. So to your point, for some cases, and I think most certainly you're seeing companies, for example, leap after it and say, hey, you need the AI SEO. And I think they're still trying to agree on what the term is, but some version of that optimized for ChatGPT, Anthropic, and what have you, because they are quote unquote going to drive traffic. Perplexity, all these others are going to drive traffic. I think Ahmad at Mercury had mentioned that they were starting to see spikes in traffic, small, but like from some of these engines. So I think there's an optimization there. And I do believe you're right that in certain cases, yes, your volume might be lower, but it's all about qualified leads. At the end of the day, are you going to make more money or less money using this as a traffic source? So that's what you care about. The thing is certain businesses are going to be decimated regardless. Like if I'm in the business of Quora, or I'm in the business of Stack Overflow. I mean, God, I don't even know if kids are using that anymore, but like things that like we used to use, like when I was coding and stuff, like I think that's tough. That's tough when you're in that business because, you know, if I'm sitting and doing the query, I get the answer in context and like they're actually putting in there. So I think some businesses are going to be destroyed through the creative destructive process. Some businesses, because they maintain they're going to be like our business, for example, a collective, like they're not going to just generate that in GPT today. And so I think what we're thinking of optimizing is, well, we want to be top recommended. We want to be top ranked. We want to be, because they are going to ultimately make a decision and we want to make it easy for them to find us. Right. And so I just think it's going to be so disruptive. And then the question is, Google's a public company, right? And so when you have the fundamental engine, your crown jewel, being reworked underneath you, what does that do? Like, at what point are these guys going to put out a report say traffic is changing on the internet? And you know, it's just so, I've never seen anything like it, like an earthquake underneath the largest country on the internet.
Look, you know, I often talk on this show about how, in my view, Google is not a massively well-run company. And I believe that sort of in the micro and mid-level, but at the macro, in terms of like strategy, like capital S strategy, Google has always been pretty good, right? Like they saw all the different waves of disruption coming. There've already been a few, right? I think the most notable one being mobile, and navigated them pretty well. Chrome and Android and Google Maps, all of these things have been like these strategic defensive plays that have not been like a profit center at all, but have been these sort of complex strategic chess moves to defend that core river of gold, that advertising business. That has been Google's playbook actually for decades now. And because of that, I kind of believe in their ability to make that transition. Because remember, mobile was a threat to Google in two ways, right? The first way was simply losing control of the platform, right? That it was going to be Apple's world, or maybe Apple and Microsoft's world, and they would lose control of distribution. So Android was an amazing defensive play for that. But the second thing, and I remember because I was there at the time, was the transition from desktop search to mobile search, producing far lower revenue, right? Far lower CTRs and things like that. There was less screen real estate. There was a whole bunch of worry in the industry saying, hey, Google is going to lose a lot of money in this transition to mobile search. And, you know, spoiler alert, they didn't. So past performance is no indication of future performance, but I'd say they're actually very clever at playing this big game and protecting their ad revenue. And so I reckon you'll see some really clever stuff happening.
I agree with you. I think, look, dangerous to bet against Google. And I think some of these, if you've learned anything from the cycles, these large incumbents have so many, they have so much redundancy in the revenue stream. Their market capitalization is high. So they have their stock as a tool to do acquisition. They have compute. I mean, they have all the advantages. So I for sure don't know that it is a Google is dead moment. In fact, I would say far from it. I think Google has plenty of time and cycles to adjust and frankly copy these other folks. The open question I have is in those other motions you discussed, like first of all, they bought their whole ad stack. They bought DoubleClick, they bought Invite, they bought Maps. Like they've done some amazing work. I actually I credit them tremendously the same way you do. It's just, I don't think they've ever been struck down the nose, with something that's their core business. And I don't know that you can model yet. And if anyone can, it's Google because they have the data, how this is going to shift the dynamic of the search market, right?
Yeah.
And the paid market. I think what you'll probably see, if Chris, you're right, and the volumes change to the lower, I think the CTRs go up, right? But maybe the overall ad spend stayed the same, right? Like, because we're, you know what I mean? Like, it's a marketplace. So I think regardless what a movie to watch, right? Google's been punched in the nose and they're responding. I've never seen it in my life. So it's pretty cool.
Here's how I think about Google, not as a search engine. For a long time, maybe always, I've thought of Google as cognition in the cloud. They are the cloud intelligence company. And in a world where we are outsourcing more and more of our cognition to the cloud in the form of what we now call generative AI, large language models, no one has done this better, and no one is in a position to do it better moving forward. Now, the primary mechanism and monetization model of their cognition has been search. That's been the primary interface. But it doesn't have to be. They have Google Home in your home. They have Google Nest slittered throughout your home. They have Android. They have now a new robotics department, a logistics and car company. They are going to express that cognition everywhere. And they also now have Google, they also have GCP, right? So they're going to power all cognition everywhere, or at least divide and conquer between Microsoft, OpenAI, Apple and them. And I don't know how they monetize it. I don't know what it's called. I don't know where all the volumes come from and where the splits occur. But in a world where we are outsourcing labor, cognitive labor and physical labor to the big magnificent seven, Google gets 1/7 of the global economy, or some mix of that, somewhere in there. I'm pretty confident about that, and I think that they're in perfectly fine shape.
I think you're right. I think just again back to it's because they're a public company. We have to validate this, and maybe I'll use so you guys can check this. But when I last checked, and this was a bit ago, I think it's like order of magnitude. Search ad volume is like 60% of their business. So it just depends on how disruptive this is, in my opinion. And if the market cap drops enough and things happen, we just don't know the nature of what this means for them. I think, again, they have diversified revenue. They have all these other things. I'm not disagreeing that they're in a position to do, but Microsoft in some ways is better positioned because they have enterprise. And so they're not as subject to the disruption of AI hitting their near-term models, in some ways,
I don't know about that. I think in a world where these models can generate a lot of software on their own, where they can drive further disintegration of old structures, freelance, independent work, entrepreneurship, the corporations start to become, looser and looser ties. And we all start working, on our own stuff on the fly, wishing on the LLM genie and getting what we want. I think the future is consumer. I think the future is personal. And I think Google and Apple are in a great place for that. And I think Apple has shat the bed. I've said this many, many, many episodes ago, many months ago, that Apple's obsession with privacy and local on-device stuff is going to bite them in the ass. And it is biting them in the ass. Siri is a piece of shit. They are months and months behind, and Google is coming up and owning.
How do you really feel?
It's a piece of shit, and I think they're struggling with their whole what's private, what's public, how much data can we use, what's personal content. They're struggling with all of this stuff, and Google doesn't have any of that debt, any of that kind of cognitive debt, the promise in the company brand. They're in a really strong position. I'm not saying all of a sudden, Microsoft goes away, Apple goes away. I'm just saying Google is in a very, very strong position as a consumer devices and AI company. That's very, very powerful.
Yeah. Fair. I was more commenting along the lines of market cap stability, right? So if they navigate it, I think they're in a good position.
But the other thing, Hooman, one difference between Google and Microsoft is that Google has a dual class shareholder structure. So they are public, but Larry, Sergey, and Eric still actually control the company. So, while on the one hand, they've shown quite a lot of discipline around stock price and all the sort of Wall Street games. I think if they see an existential threat, they're actually empowered to ignore shareholders and do what they got to do. And we'll see if that's actually what happens.
It's a good catch and a good point, and it is a tool that we haven't seen them have to bring to bear.
That's right. But if you're a Google shareholder, you're just along for the ride, even if you have a major shareholding.
And Facebook.
Yep, and Facebook.